Leading with more intention. What does that mean? We're going to talk about that today on the Limitless Leadership Lounge, a tri-generational conversation for emerging leaders. I'm John Gehring, joined alongside Dr. Numa Kareem, as always, and Coach Jim Johnson. It's one of the episodes that we bring to you without a special guest, with just the three of us, so we can share some insights. And conveniently, we think there are three keys to being a more intentional leader. And at the end of the summer, as we wrap up, it's a great time to reflect on our leadership. And it's all about intentionality. And using these three keys will definitely move the needle in your leadership game and your personal development. So without any further ado, let's dive right in with Coach, who I think is wonderful at leading with intention and living his life with great intention. Let's talk about the first key to being a more intentional leader.
Sure. The two words that always jump out to me is intentional, which we're talking about, and the other word is consistent. Because if you're intentional, you have to be consistent. And one of the things that I think one major key, we hear this so much in leadership, and I challenge leaders, and I want to share about this, is trust. Because when I do my leadership presentations, I'll always ask, is trust important to building a great team culture? Always is 100% hands up.
Hmm.
But then I shock them when I say, well, do you have a plan on how you're going to build trust? And most of them don't have any idea. And that's something that really was a light bulb moment for me when I realized how important it is to build trust. So I want to just give two ideas. One is I want to just give you a quick synthesis of the 3 points we used in building trust and really helped our programs be more successful. The 3 points for us was number one is that we had to align our words and actions. As the leader, you got to lead by example. Often you're the person when it's a difficult situation, you got to be willing to go first. And therefore, if you say that being on time is important, yet you are late 5 minutes, that hurts the trust account. And if you're chronically late, then your words and actions mean very little in building trust. Number two is really being able to tell the truth to each other. If there's any lying, it really hurts the trust account. In fact, in the court of law, they say if you lie, then everything of the evidence you released now is thrown out because they can't trust you. So we really try to build a foundation of telling the truth. And that means there is an art and science because sometimes you'll say you don't want to say the truth to embarrass somebody in front of the team, but you then bring them to the side and share, in a truthful, trustful way of what you mean. And the third thing is, I took over 4 programs that were all losing. The first one was a disaster. The other three we did quite well. Is that you got to come in with the idea of catching people doing the right thing and then praising specifically. So my challenge to our listeners is, you can use my points, but I will really encourage you to use what you will find is developing trust. And my last thought before I share it with or let Renuma go here is that when you build trust, you should really build agreements with each team member, and so that you are agreeing on together of the expectations. And when you get, I often would do contracts with players where I would sign it, the player would sign it. So there was no ambiguity that, it was very clear of the expectations, and both the player and I knew that. So that's a great way to build trust is having the agreement that we both mutually agree and very clear about. Renuma, how about you? What's your thoughts?
Oh, it's all about intention. I think if we read the biography of all those top important people in this world, they all had an intention to follow. And there is this saying that when your intention is clear, so is the way.
Mm,
So I think that is so true. And one thing I have discovered from myself that connecting to values, I think you mentioned like aligning with the action. So when you can align better when you know what you are valuing. And when you know your values, then your intention also becomes clearer. So, for an example, when coach came to Brockport I think in 2015 or something like that. And I was in his talk, and when he was talking about dreams, big dreams, and immediately a few of the things sticked in. Whatever he was talking about, my value structure aligned with his. And immediately I said that I need to meet him and I need to invite him to be in the board of the nonprofit I'm starting. So immediately my intentions were clear because I knew my value matched with a coach. It aligned totally. And I'm a nobody, and I'm just by got coach's book. He gave me an autograph, and I asked him like, "Can we have a coffee with you?" And just discuss few ideas. And coach, being amazing, he said yes. So I think your trust level is very high, coach. But that thing really mattered. And when we talked and we formed our nonprofit and everything, so it was the intention followed by those actions. But initially, you need to explore what your values are, because once you are very clear about your values, then your intention, no matter what the world is telling you, you can stay on that path, and it becomes easier. So for me it was so easy. I had to go through so many challenges because of my intention of starting a non-profit, helping young people become reach out for their potential, that even when I don't have any money in my bank account, everybody is telling me, why are you letting go of your title? You are a PhD holder and all these things. But it was so easy for me to let go of all those external elements because my intention was so clear that what I want to do. So I think it is so important for us to have that awareness of what we are intending. And people who are around you, I think they also get the vibe of your intention. If you're authentic in your intention, or it's just some like fluff you are giving. So this is so clear. Like I can identify who is just making things up and who is very clear with one's intention. So it's a very powerful tool. So in whatever we are doing in your relationship, at work, anything, I think having a clear intention with strong values are so important to move forward.
Yep. So the first two keys here, Coach, talking about building trust. Renuma, you made a great point about aligning your values. And I think that also is great because it's really the litmus test, the filter through which you make all decisions in your life is your values. And that's a great way to become an intentional leader. I'm going to cover one more, which I think it's important to reiterate. We've talked about it a lot here on the podcast, but leadership starts with leading oneself. And I think the third and final key to being a more intentional leader is being more intentional with your daily routine and personal growth plan. And I know this seems counterintuitive to some people because we think of leadership, we think of other people. We think of, well, how are we guiding and directing our team? What orders are we giving? How are we building relationships within our team? Those are all important parts of being a leader. But number one is leading yourself. And how do you do that? It may look different for different people. I know some people coach gets up early in the morning and exercises. Some people, find time to do that later in the day. It's not a magic bullet of what your morning routine is. It's not, meditating for 2 hours, getting up at 4 a.m. If you aren't going to stick to it consistently, you're not going to be very effective. It's not going to work for you. But coming up with some sort of personal growth plan so that you're not stagnant, because you lead by example. You really do. And that's how you live your life. That's how you dress every day as a leader. That's how you carry yourself confidently. And there are many studies that show physical activity, for one thing, is one way to build great confidence and become more effective in your personal life and your leadership life. So not just exercise, but the way you feed your mind, the way you feed your body through your nutrition, and all those ways that you lead yourself are going to rub off on your team. And it doesn't seem like we should use one of the three keys on something that isn't even about your team. But I think it's that important that the way you lead yourself does rub off on your team. So, in summary, we have building trust, we have aligning our values, and we have leading yourself before you can lead anybody else. Three ways that we can really set intention as a leader and improve that area of our leadership lives. Coach, how about some final thoughts, and especially a question for you, because I know you're really good at this and you really have a regimented schedule in many ways. How does a leader apply these three keys into their leadership life? What might a day look like for them?
That's a great point, John. And I'll answer the question. I got one other thought. So the question is just in three things. You analyze the first is the trust, is that I highly encourage our listeners to really think about developing their trust plan with the 2 or 3 points that they're going to be consistent with in building that trust. And remember, trust is built on a daily basis. Two, with Renuma, she had a very powerful thought. As a leader, we have to be intentional. And I think starting with getting clarity of your value. I call them your core values, your top 3 or 4 values that you're going to live consistently no matter what. And then, John, to your point, I always start my leadership presentations by asking the audience, who's the first person you got to lead? So you really struck a good chord with me on that one because what I really encourage, I wrote a blog not too long ago about the fact that what are your daily non-negotiables? Like we were trying to build habits and build habits. Excuse me, you got to start with something that's non-negotiable. For me, example is something that was non-negotiable starting many years ago. Excuse me, is that I decided that I was going to exercise every day and I would intentionally block out a time each day to exercise. And as I got that as a daily habit, a non-negotiable, then I started to add other things. Like, for example, I pray every day. I also do meditation every day. And I do those between morning and night and sometimes in the middle of the day. But there are certain things that I do every single day. And the last point I'll make is that in being an effective leader and intentional, remember the 3 R's in education I kidded with us before is relationships, relationships, relationships. I know everybody was thinking reading, writing, and arithmetic. And the reason I bring that up is because you have to be intentional in building relationships. People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. So make sure as a leader that you are clear in building relationships as you show your care, with recognizing and praising when people do well, correcting them when they don't, having one-on-one check-ins and just asking how they're doing, what are they working on? How can I best support them? Are all ideas in building relationships because like trust and the other things we just talked about, building relationships is a daily thing.
Yeah, Renew, any final thoughts from your side?
Yeah, just one short saying that I really love. Like it's choices, not chances, that determines our destiny. So what you mentioned, like how we are going to decide what to do, staying in discipline, waking up in the right time. So all those things met are our choices. So we have to be intentional on our choices, not live life randomly, just waking up and scrolling through our text and all those things. So yeah, so I think when we have those things in order, things becomes easier to move towards our goals of life.
I love what you just said there, Renuma, because that's really the whole point of intention. It's to
Mhm.
avoid doing what I would say 90+% of our world does, and that's living life randomly. And I
Mhm.
have to say that I'm guilty of it too, right? We let our lives and our days kind of guide us, like we're the puppy chasing the bunny.
Right.
We're not in control of our own lives. And that's what
Mhm.
leading with intention does for ourselves and for the teams or the relationships that we're leading in. So, very valuable points. Get the little summary down in the show notes if you want to reiterate those 3 points that we made today on being a more intentional leader. Also, be sure to, wherever you're listening to, maybe you're watching up on YouTube, subscribe to our YouTube channel if you want to see more content like this, hear more content like this from us, and also guests that we bring on. We'll be back next week with another guest to kick off the month of September as the colors are beginning to change, and there's this cool breeze in the air that I'm not a big fan of, but we're gonna keep rolling here on the Limitless Leadership Lounge. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next week.